How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is Deck Ready, my channel all about the Steam Deck. And you guessed it, in today's video, we have 3 news topics to cover, starting out with the fact that there are 19,000 verified games on the Steam Deck and why, despite the verification system not being great, that is a good thing. After that, we're going to talk about how the next Xbox is going to be built like a PC and allow Steam to be installed, but I'm not really sure how that's going to help Xbox. And finally, all 3 Stalker games, the originals, just got enhanced editions on Steam, which are free if you own the game. The reviews are mostly negative, but I'm going to tell you why and also why it's worth trying them out on the Steam Deck. So yeah, let's jump into the first news story here, which is that there are 19,000 games verified for the Steam Deck, which is an insane number. The way Steam Deck HQ tracks this is by using ProtonDB, because ProtonDB crawls through the Steam backend because they want to show you all that data, and then they can tell obviously how many games are verified, which is great. Now, if you're like a seasoned Steam Deck vet, you're probably like me, where when you first read this, you're like, who cares, because the verification system is meaningless. But I will say there have been some good verified games coming out recently, like the Precinct. The verification system actually works and tells you a verified game that runs well on the Steam Deck, which is awesome. They also have that new system in place, which is does the game boot up on Steam OS? And I saw some pushback from people who were like, that's not a good system because if it boots up, it might not work after you get to the menu. And yeah, that's fair, but like, I still think it's better than the current verification system because the current verification system is a mess. They put a green check mark on a game. People who have a Steam Deck and don't watch Deck Ready or don't go on Reddit or like don't follow Steam accounts on Twitter and everything like that, they're not going to know that the check mark is meaningless, and they're going to have a bad experience if they see a big green check mark on a game and they boot it up and it runs at 10 FPS and doesn't work right. They're going to lose trust in that verification system. So that's why I think having a yes/no system is better, because if the rating system just tells you whether or not the game boots up on SteamOS, you're going to have less bad feelings if the game doesn't work all that well or run all that well or look all that good if it's just a yes or no system and not a giant green check mark on there. Also, I bet there's a massive list of games that people skip when they see the yellow eye, because yellow is like a caution sign. So like if you see a caution sign, you only got a few minutes to game at night, you know, you're not going to like waste time trying to see if the game runs. And then there's a billion unsupported games that work just fine on the Steam Deck. I don't know why they don't just leave those unknown. Like, what about these games is making them get listed as unsupported? Like, is it the developers? Are they listing their games as unsupported because they don't want to take 2 seconds to test them on the Steam Deck? Who knows? Unsupported should be reserved for games that straight up don't work, and that's why the new system is good. Also, the verification system is just a great marketing tool. I think some websites have caught on to the fact that it sucks, and now they say, shocker, Spider-Man 2 should not be rated as verified for the Steam Deck, Oblivion should not be rated as verified for the Steam Deck. But the vast majority of sites out there who, you know, don't actually play games, they just write about them and then complain when they have things they don't like on Twitter, they use that verification system as a green light to say whether or not the game works on Steam Deck or runs on the Steam Deck. So having a bunch of websites doing free advertising for you saying, wow, all these games like Oblivion work great on the Steam Deck, that's good for getting the knowledge out there. Hopefully people just take the extra step to look up channels like Steam Deck Gaming or Deck Wizard to see how well the game actually runs. One publisher that I know puts a lot of effort into the Steam Deck is Indie.io. My friend Ben, who I've featured on the channel before, he works for them, and I've actually helped them out a couple of times with games like Humanity. I don't know how to say it, but it's Humanity without the Y, and instead of the Y there's a Z. The developer of that game is trying to get his game Steam Deck verified, and I told him what things usually get games dinged. Also, another game from them that I featured on the channel was Kamos, and I think that game's really good. They went through the effort to get verified at launch, and I like their games because if they go through the effort to get it verified, it's because the game actually works on the Steam Deck and they want to advertise that fact. They like set the gold standard, in my opinion, for, you know, actually getting games verified that should be verified. Another one is New Blood Interactive. They put out games like Dusk or A Medieval, I'm pretty sure, and then there's Faith, the Unholy Trinity. I think all 3 of those games are verified, and I like with Dusk, they waited until it was actually worth verifying on the Steam Deck to get it verified. So there are good indie publishers out there going through the effort to make sure that the games they submit for verification should be verified. It's just crazy that indie developers are the gold standard, and the AAA ones who are spending tens of millions of dollars to hundreds of millions of dollars on their games don't give a shit. They're like, yeah, let's just get the check mark on there without even testing it and just throw it out and just like hope people get tricked into buying it. There's just like a total inversion of how that should work. Like, I'd be much more forgiving of an indie developer for not knowing selling any better or not having the extra budget to spend on like a Steam Deck that they can keep around their office than I would be a AAA publisher. But the indie developers are the ones putting in the work, and the AAA publishers are being lazy as usual. So like nothing's changed, and De Nouveau sucks. Going back to 2 videos ago. I don't know where I was going with that statement. But yeah, obviously verification system needs some work. I think it will be improved over time. Valve knows obviously that it sucks because there's constant complaints. And like I mentioned earlier, there are other websites that write about how bad it sucks. So I just assume that once they get SteamOS shipped, Legion Go S comes out with SteamOS, then they can start worrying about smaller things like fixing their busted system. But yeah, that brings me to the second news story here. There are a ton of leaks coming out around Xbox and what they're doing with the next gen of consoles. Apparently they're going to use an ARM chip, so similar to the M chips in Apple devices, or going back to like Windows 8, I want to say. They were really big on making ARM chip devices. Like there was a cheaper Surface, I remember when I worked at Staples in high school, that was like $300 and ran ARM Windows, and you could only get apps through the Windows Store. Like there was no x86 emulation. I'm so glad I didn't buy that. But now that ARM chips are really good, they're kind of going back to that well. And you can kind of see everything cohesing together, where the desktop PCs are going to use ARM and have like a translation layer, sort of like Proton for Xbox games and Windows PC games. And then they can kind of make Xbox branded PCs that have a flavor of an operating system on it, sort of like SteamOS. There's a big rumor coming out though that they're working really hard to make sure that Steam itself will work on that Xbox. And a lot of people are looking at that as it being like very helpful for Xbox, but I just don't see why they'd put that much effort into doing it, because I just don't see how they make money from having Steam on an Xbox console. Like I'm putting console in air quotes because it's a PC at the end of the day. Their real moneymaker would be the Xbox app, right? If you could play Xbox original games, Xbox 360 games, Xbox One games, and Xbox Series games, but like the PC versions of those games, you want to do that through the Xbox app. And a lot of those games aren't available on Steam, or, you know, are just free through Game Pass on the Xbox app. So you'd think they just want to make that the only thing you can use and push that as far as possible. Like that's what I would do if I was Microsoft. I wouldn't want to be encouraging people to use Steam, because even if you do buy games like Forza Horizon 4 or 5 through Steam, I mean, Xbox only gets 70% of the revenue, whereas if you go to the Xbox app, you get 100% of the revenue, or a Game Pass subscription, when there's no integration between Game Pass and Steam for some reason. So it's weird that there's like this big news and marketing push around it having Steam and how that would be a game changer for Xbox, but they have good enough games now where they could just not have Steam on this thing and probably convince more people to use the Xbox app. I'm obviously not complaining about that, because the value proposition there is great for the next Xbox, and honestly makes me like excited to see what it is, not necessarily to buy it, but just to see how that kind of pushes console gaming forward and gets more people interested in PC, because I feel like the Xbox style OS would be a great stepping stone to something more full featured like Steam, right? Like you get a taste of it with the Xbox app, and then you're like, man, there's so many more games on Steam, and they're running all these sales, and they've got the Steam Deck, and like everything works so great on Steam. I'm going to build a PC, install Steam on it, or I'm going to buy a Steam Deck and play all my Steam games and build out a library there. The only other reason I can think of is like maybe they just see the data that like a lot of the people who use the Xbox app on Windows split their time between Xbox app and Steam, and they want to give them a value proposition to buy Xbox hardware, even if it is just a PC, so that they can play all of their games on there. But like, I don't know. I think the big economy now is not necessarily money, it's hours spent on a platform. So if they can get that big number of like, we got a bunch of people who are only playing Steam games, but we can say they're spending more time on Xbox, that looks good to the shareholders. I'm not a big businessman, I don't know, but I just thought it was interesting that whatever they're going to do next is going to include not only the Xbox app, but also Steam and the Epic Game Store. So you're going to have a lot of options to play games, which at the end of the day, consumer friendly and cool. But yeah, that brings me to the third news story here, which is you should try out the Stalker games on the Steam Deck now. I messed around with this before Stalker 2 came out last year. I tried to get the controls set up, and like, it just didn't translate very well. Like, even though you could set the right stick to be mouse movement, it was like crazy high sensitivity and it just wasn't very accurate. Then they released the console versions on PS5, and they put in all this effort to make full controller support and increase the graphics a little bit. And they were like, maybe we'll bring that to PC. And now they have an enhanced edition edition update out for consoles and PC that adds in controller support. Best part is, if you have Shadow of Chernobyl, Clear Sky, and Call of Pripyat in your Steam library, you get these upgrades for free. Even though they're full new games, you can just get them for free, which I think is pretty cool. I went to the Steam store and I saw they're mostly negative. The first reason they're mostly negative is that they took out the Russian VO, and people liked playing with the Russian VO, so they think it's dumb they took it out. I'm assuming there will be a mod pretty quickly with the Russian voice pack to just be added back in because the files are out there. So like if it is the same game, it probably won't be that hard to add it in. I play it in English. I don't really have an opinion on the matter, but that's a big reason people are giving it negative reviews. The other reason is it looks a little bit blurry with its default settings, but I looked at my favorite site, Steam Deck HQ, and they already had a guide up to make it look a lot more clear on the Steam Deck. So if you don't use FSR, like run it natively, it has issues. It looks blurry and like shimmery if you don't use FSR. So you're going to want FSR on. And unfortunately, these games don't run all that well in native FSR. So you're going to want to set it to quality. And then if you set it to the medium preset, you get a 100% locked 45 frames per second. I tried it out myself just to make sure, because you know, you go on the Reddit, you go to some articles, they say, oh yeah, performs great. I get a locked 30 FPS with some minor dips, and those minor dips are like to 10 FPS and they happen every 5 minutes. And then they say, oh, it's running great on my Steam Deck. And you're like, no, it's not. The Steam Decks are all the same. Yours isn't some magical special Steam Deck that runs everything perfectly while everyone else's is just stupid and dumb and doesn't run things well. It's just you can't see it and you're acting like you can. All of this is kind of coinciding with Stalker 2 finally getting its advertised A-Life feature that they took out right before launch. That game still doesn't run all that well on the Steam Deck, so these are a great middle ground. And I think a lot of people still like the original Stalker games better. I played these games in high school and they were like life-changing. So if you want a really cool open world RPG set in the Chernobyl exclusion zone, can't really do much better because A, there aren't that many of them, and B, these are like the best of the best. Give yourself some time to get acclimated to it for sure. A, because they're older games, so like, you know, there's a little bit more tougher onboarding that you have to deal with, but also once you get the systems figured out, they're not as complicated as they seem and you get into a really good groove and flow with the game. The AI is what makes these games special. The AI is simulated so that everything just happens whether you're in that zone of the map or not. So like factions will fight each other. You'll roll up on guys having shootouts. You'll roll up on dead bodies. I mean, you'll roll up on guys getting sucked into anomalies and flung across the map. That's what makes these games really cool. And with the added benefit of the controller support, the aiming just gets a little bit better. My one tip is to turn off aim assist because it is way too aggressive and you actually miss more shots with the aim assist than you do without it, which doesn't make sense because that's kind of the whole point of aim assist. But other than that, I'm pretty persnickety about graphics on the Steam Deck. Like I'm not going to play these games that you have to drop to the lowest of the low settings and run at 540p to actually get playable frame rates. And some people are fine with that. That's just not me. I need like some crystal clear image quality and like a locked 30. And this game looks really good to my eye. I don't know why people are saying it's blurry with FSR because it doesn't look blurry to me when I'm playing on the Steam Deck. It might look blurry on a big gaming PC blown up, but it looks like 800p to me on my Steam Deck. So I'm going to give it a recommendation. I think they took away access to the original Stalker games, which sucks, but like those are all over abandonware sites and they probably run better if you don't run them through Steam because you can get the enhanced edition mods that people have made over the years, Stalker Complete mods that people have made over the years, and this doesn't do anything to screw up a Stalker Anomaly install if you had that going. So overall, the voice thing, I have no opinion on. The blurriness, I'm not experiencing on the Steam Deck, but obviously everyone's different. So if you think it's blurry, I'm sorry I led you the wrong way. Lash me in the comments for it. But yeah, that about brings me to the end of this video. Remember, 100K gets the Viper reveal. I will do a full news video in the front seat of my Viper at 100K. And I think it'll be worth it because I babied the shit out of that thing. I'm going to wash it this weekend and take it out, and I'm very excited. Anyway, guys, as always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching and shape on.